This shir is on Perek Tes. It's not the last shir on this Maamar. It's in all likelihood the second to the last shir on this Maamar. And we haven't addressed the most important and sensitive and deep inyan in this Maamar adequately yet. I keep on referring to it, I keep on talking about it, I keep on saying I haven't explained it well. So that's what's going to happen tonight again. And the reason I can't explain it well is because I don't fully understand it myself, or I don't understand it myself at all. The issue basically is that there are two ideas. One idea is tziyur, and the other idea is pshitus. In general, pshitus is representative of pshitus, is the reality of Elokus. Hashem is one, and He's Ein Sof, and He's Pashat. So everything, in as much as it's connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is Pashat. The worlds are the opposite of that. The worlds are tziyur, the words are ischalkus, the words are agbola, the words are helam v'hester. And there's a meeting between the pshitas of Elokus and the tziyur of worlds. And of course, the reason for the meeting between the pshitas of Elokus and the tziyur of worlds is because the ultimate end is to create a synthesis, to bring together these two opposites. That in the tziyur of the world there should be the presence of the pshitas of Elokus. And of course, the difficulty is that pshitas and tziyur have no interface. They have no place where to meet. Because if it's pshitas, has nothing to do with tziyur. And if it's pshita, has no connection to tziyur. And if it's tziyur, no connection to pshitas. So how pshitas and tziyur are supposed to meet? So in general, and I've talked about this at length in the earlier classes on this Maamar also, this is what Atzilus is. Atzilus has Oir and Keli. Oir represents pshitos and the Keli represents tziyur. And then there's the meeting between Oir and Keli. In other words, Oir and Keli come together, they meet, they interface, they interact, they join. And of course, Chassidus states the obvious, what's commonsensical and logical, that if Oir and Keli meet, and they join, and they become one, it must be that before they met, there was already a relationship. There was something about Keli that qualified it to receive Ein Sof, and there was something about the Ein Sof which prepared it to go into the Keli, which is the idea of tziyur. In other words, the very notion of the meeting of Oir and Keli in Atzilus means that the Oir is not absolutely Pashat. That even the Oir has an element of tziyur. Which brings the question back again. If the ultimate purpose of the world, as I'm presenting it here, as I'm proposing here, as I'm explaining here, is the fusion of pshitas and tziyur, and when you talk about Atzilus as the place where pshitas and tziyur, where Ein Sof and Gavul converge, you have to say that even the Oir, before it meets the Keli, is already what they call Oir Mitzuyir or Efshari Atziyur, and whatever level you want to say, so that it can meet the Keli and be mislabish in the Keli and misachar with the Keli and so forth. So then you're back to the same question. The Oir is not Pashat anymore. So this Maamar offers a solution, a very, very sensitive solution and a very deep solution. And I want to make it very clear, our Maamar is not focused on the question I'm asking. Our Maamar is talking about something entirely different. Our Maamar is talking about the Pasuk Kamayim Aponim Leponim Kain Leiv Adam Elad. But this is what emerges from the Maamar. When you bring together all the pieces of the Maamar, this is what the Maamar is ultimately reaching towards. The bringing together the true idea of pshitos and the true idea of tziyur. What's the Maamar's solution? How can pshitos and tziyur meet if, in order for Eid and Keli to meet, the Eid already has to have a Yifum Gavin. The Eid has to have some kind of a connection to tziyur. So the Eid is no longer Pashat. So where do you have the true meeting between pshitas and tziyur? So the answer that this Maamar gives, which we've talked about in a number of prior classes, and we finished the class last week with this idea, and we're going to begin again from the beginning of Perek Tes and repeat again this idea, is that in Ishtalshlos there's a chitzonius and a pnimius. The chitzonius comes first and the pnimius comes second. In other words, it's the opposite of what you would imagine. Normally you would think of the pnimius coming first and the chitzonius coming second. In this case, the chitzonius comes first and the pnimius comes second. Now the Rebbe did mention in a ha'ara earlier on, ha'ara 43, that to be sure, the chitzonius and the pnimius happen simultaneously, concurrently, or almost at the same time. But when you want to discuss them, when you want to develop the ideas, you want to be enlightening of the ideas, there are two levels. There's a chitzonius level and a pnimius level. First comes the chitzonius level, then comes the pnimius level. The chitzonius level is where Hashem created the world. Where Hashem created the world, there is a journey from the Pshitas of Ein Sof to Tziyur of Elames. And in as much as this is concerned, when Oyer comes into Keli, it must be that before the Oyer went into Keli, the Oyer already had a connection to the Keli, or perhaps even an Inyan from Tziyur and Oyres. And therefore the meeting of Oyer and Keli, which works, which is a Hislapshas Pnimi of Ein Seif and Gvul, and they become one, is predicated on the fact that the Eid is not posher b'tachas apshitos. The Eid is not Ein Seif in the fullest sense of the word. The Eid is prepared to go into the Keli, meaning to say that it's a Eidel Tzir meeting a more basic Tzir, as opposed to a non-Tzir meeting a Tzir. So where do you have the meeting of Pshitos and Tzir? And the answer is, this is the Pnimius. That after there's the Chitzenius of Eir going into Keli, which has to do with Tziyur, there's a process called Kamayim Aponim Laponim. That the Tziyur of Atzilus is mirrored of the Pshitas of Ein Seif, and then that mirror is reflected back down onto Atzilus. In other words, it's as if you were to say the Eir of Ein Seif comes into Atzilus twice. Bechitzonius, the Eir of Ein Seif comes into Atzilus because the Eir has a Gavin and a Tziyur and a connection to Keli. And at Pnimius Dika level, the Eir, which is absolutely Pashut, is reflected back onto Atzilus because of the principle of Kamayim, Aponim, Laponim, Kein, Leiv, Adam, Alad. And the way this Maimir articulates it is by saying two opposite things, or two very opposite things. The first idea is, when you look into a mirror, the mirror gives you back yourself. When you look into a mirror and the mirror gives you back yourself, the way this Maimon insists on explaining it is there's two steps. Number one, your image becomes a part of the mirror. And number two, the mirror is giving it to you back. In other words, there's a special emphasis that there's two steps here. Now in the Mashal HaGashmi of a mirror, I don't know how it works. And of course the Maimon doesn't use the Mashal of a mirror. The Maimon uses the Mashal of water, that when you look into water that's clear, and that's still, because water has no pre-definition, no prior form or color, you see yourself. So the Maimon insists the first thing that happens that you impress yourself on the water, and then as a separate Inyan, the water gives you back the image that you gave the water. It is almost as if the Maimon is trying to insist that the water is being changed by your reflection and giving you back the change that you impressed upon the water. That's one side of the contradiction. And the other side of the contradiction is that in the water you don't exist at all. When you look into the water, you don't become impressed upon the water. The water is totally separate from your image. So even though your image appears in the water, in as much as your image appears in the water, it's totally separate from the water. The water has not taken on your image at all. So when the water gives you back the image, it's giving you back itself. It's giving you back the plainness of the water. Now those two ideas are a contradiction. The first point is that you impress your image on the water gives you back the image. The second idea is that when you look into water, you're not changing the water in any way. Because you're not changing the water in any way, you are the water. You are the pshitas of the water. And when the water is giving you back your image, it's giving you back your pshitas. The Rebbe wants us to combine both of these mishalim, both of these physical ideas. These ideas as we can understand them physically. Number one, how the image that looks into the water changes the water and the water gives it back. Number two, the image that looks into the water never becomes part of the water. And when the water gives it back, the water is giving back itself as a vehicle to understanding the idea of the perfect synthesis between tzir and pshitus. In this case, you have water, which is a mashal for ein seif, pshitusei, which is reflecting a tzir, but because the tzir never becomes a part of the ein seif, and the ein seif is reflecting back that tzir because of the pshitus of the ein seif, what is reflecting back is not a tzir, but the pshitus of ein seif. In other words, you're combining two ideas that are contradictory and saying if you can figure out, if you can use your intelligence and your creativity and your imagination to create an intellectual space where both of these ideas can exist together, where the water is giving you back something that you gave it, and on the other hand, what the water is giving you back is nothing other than water itself because you haven't really changed the water, you can appreciate this deeper concept of fusion of pshitus and tzir. Oid ein seif goes into keli, this is called chitanias. But ein seif goes into keli on the level of chitanias because the oid is prepared for the keli. Then there is what's called esesfiris hagnuzis and the pshitus of ein seif, which is absolutely no tzir, which is mislabish in keli, comes down into keli. How can something which is absolutely no tzir comes down into keli? Because of the principle of kamayim aponim laponim. The image of Atzilus is reflected off the pshitas of the Ein Seif, and the pshitas of the Ein Seif is reflected back to Atzilus. On the one hand, what is being reflected back is the spheres of Atzilus that looked into the pshitas of the Ein Seif. On the other hand, what's being reflected back are the pshitas of the Ein Seif. In other words, the pnimius of the Ein Seif, which is mislabish in kelim of Atzilus, is the real concept of the fusion of pshitas and tzir. The Eid is totally pashat, because what's being reflected back is not the tzir you put into the water, but the water itself. On the other hand, because it's being reflected back, because of an edidus, an arousal from below, because of kamayim aponim laponim, what's being reflected back has tzir in as much as hislapshus and pnimius is concerned. And this is the whole, so to speak, the direction of this Maamar. This Maamar has been discussing kamayim aponim laponim, kein leiv adam ala adam. We haven't gotten yet to Kain Level Adam Al Adam. It's Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to get to it tonight. But what we have learned is Kamayim Aponim Laponim. And the way the Maamar explains Kamayim Aponim Laponim, it is as follows. There is the Chitzenius of Esesfiris, which is reflected off the Pshitas of Ein Seif, that then reflects back that Pshitas of Ein Seif again into Atzilus, which is called Kamayim Aponim Laponim, the face of Atzilus. It looks into the Pshitas of the Ein Seif, is reflected back from the Pshitas of Ein Seif into the Atzilus on a pnimius level. On the one hand, what's being reflected back is the face that looked into the water, that means the ponim of Atzilus. On the other hand, because the ponim of Atzilus is not at all in the water, what's being reflected back is the pshitas of water. So this is the, so to speak, the ultimate idea of bringing together pshitas and tzir. It's tzir, because the eid is coming down because of the idea of tzir. And it's pshitos, because the way the air comes down is a reflection of the pshitos of Ein Seif. Now, I must admit that I just told you what the Maamar is saying, but I don't understand it fully. I don't understand the idea. I appreciate that the Rebbe is saying something very deep and very serious. And I appreciate that in a narrow way, the idea that he's trying to say that's deep and serious is the idea of a yichud of two opposites, in as much as opposites are possible. And to what degree are they opposites? On the one hand, it's mamish pshitas of Ein Seif. On the other hand, it's a hislapshus and kelim of Atzilus, means that the shaykh has to tzir, because in this oir, which is kamayim aponim laponim, reflected back on Atzilus, you have two opposites, mamish the pshitas of Ein Seif, and how the pshitas of Ein Seif has within itself tzir, and it's still the pshitas of Ein Seif. So, I can't explain it better, because I don't understand it any better. But I've given you the food for thought. I've given you what you need to do the hisbonenus, to contemplate that, to consider how sensitive and how edel and how fine what this Maamar is saying. In tonight's class, this idea, as we repeated it just now, is going to become particularly important in conjunction with the second half of the pasuk. Kein leiv ha'adam al adam. Kamayim aponim laponim means that the tziyur of Atzilus is reflected off the pshitas of Ein Seif and then reflected back into Atzilus. Kein leiv ha'adam al adam means so too adam atachna, means a human being down here on this earth touches and reflects off adam ha'elyon, which is Atzilus. And the problem is going to be, isn't Atzilus tziyur? And if Atzilus is tziyur, it's not going to be a good reflector, it's not going to be a good mirror. The whole premise of Kamayim aponim laponim is that because the water has no pre-definition, it reflects whatever you look into it. But Adam Ha'elyon has a definition. The chitzenius of Adam Ha'elyon is tziyur and svidus. And the pasuk says, Kamayim aponim laponim kein leiv Adam al Adam, that Adam Atachn is reflected of Adam Ha'elyon. The question is how? And the answer is, Kamayim aponim laponim, when Atzilus reflects off the Ein Seif. And then Ein Seif is mislabish, what's called the pnimius, as opposed to the chitzenius of Esesvidus. In Atzilus, that means that in Atzilus you now have pshitos. Because this pnimius idea of Ein Seif is both tziyur and pshitos in an absolute way. And then you have Kein leiv Adam al Adam. It sets up the possibility for Adam Atachn to be reflected of Adam Ha'elyon, because Adam Ha'elyon has a pnimius, and the pnimius of Adam Ha'elyon is a reflection of the pshitos of Ein Seif, and therefore Adam Atachn reflects itself of Adam Ha'elyon, just like Adam Ha'elyon reflects itself off the pshitos of the Ein Seif. That's going to be the pshat in the pasuk, and that's going to be the body, the ikin of what we're going to be discussing here in Perek Tes of the Maamar. So we're going to start Perek Tes again. V'hinei. Mavur ba'adrushim, the Maamarim explain. That means the Maamar that discusses this idea of Kamayim aponim laponim kein leiv adam al adam, which is in Ayin Beis. Shahaponim hanidim b'hamayim. When the face appears on the water, mikivan shehem mitzad haponim hamistaklim. There is nothing about the water that has that face. The face is entirely from the person looking into the water. The water is being affected by the face, but besides for the fact that the water is of the same basic material, they're both physical, and therefore the interface in the water, there is no face at all. It's because of the face looking into the water, and not the water. Accordingly, therefore, when the face looks into the water and impresses itself upon the water, you don't now have two things in the water, a water and a face. When the face is impressing itself upon the face, as the water reflects it, is water itself. Ela hamayim atzmon, they're the waters themselves. The bi'im haponim hanidim. If what would happen when you looked into the water is that you would reflect yourself into the water in such a way that the water now has two things, its plainness and your face. So then, haponim hanidim hoyu nimshachem mei hamayim. The face that you see wouldn't be the water itself, but the face as it is in the water. Oz hayu dover muvdol shenishava mei hamayim. It would be as though when you look into the water, you add something to the water. The water now has two things. Whatever the water is by itself, plus your face. And then the mashal for this would be Valderach Dogim Shabiyam. We know that water that live in the sea are part of the water, and it's come up before that there's a day, there's a halacha, the Dogim Shabiyam Einam Chaytetzim, fish in the water don't act as a chatzitza when somebody is toiling in the mikveh, because Bruim Shabiyam, Nivru Min Hayam, they're actually water itself. But at the same time, they're a thing within the water. So when you look at the water and you impress your countenance upon the water, if the water would be truly affected by your looking into it in the kind of way that now there is some of you in the water itself, there would be a harakava, there'd be two things. The water and the way the water is holding you in a similar way that the water holds fish. But that's not the case. The case is that when you look into the water, there is none of you in the water. It's simply the water itself that's giving you back yourself. But since the truth is that when you look into the water and you impress your countenance upon the water, and then that water reflects itself back on you, Heimlei mitzad hamayim. It's not at all because you have impressed yourself upon the water. And since it's not because you have at all impressed yourself upon the water, when the water reflects you back, it's water itself that's being reflected. Says the Rebbe, Einam davar nivdal shenishava me'amayim. There is nothing separate that has been created in the water or through the water that's being reflected back. Ela mayim atzmam, it's the waters themselves. And as I explained to you in the introduction, there's a contradiction here, a real contradiction. And to understand the Maamar correctly, you must appreciate each side of the contradiction separately, then join the two together to have a sense of what the Maamar is trying to teach. One side of the contradiction is that when you look into the water, you actually impress yourself upon the water and you make, so to speak, a change in the water. And what it is that you change in the water is being reflected back to you. Tziyur. On the other hand, when you look into the water, you haven't changed the water at all. And because you haven't changed the water at all, when the water gives you back your countenance, what you're perceiving is your countenance, but what you're really getting is the water itself, or the pshitas of the water itself. So the Rebbe continues and he says, the same can be understood when you talk about it in spiritual terms. L'mayla. The kivan, whereas the zeh shebe'ed ein seif, the fact that in the pshitas of ein seif, in atik, in the pshitas of ein seif, what the Rebbe called before esesfiras agnuzis, before they've been esesfirasized, so to speak. Yeshnam esesfiras agnuzis, there are the 10 hidden spheres. It's only huaya de alos mandas spheres. The only relationship that the pshitos of the Ein Seif has to the esesfiras is that the Eibishter wanted that when the esesfiras of Atzilus touch the pshitos of Ein Seif, the pshitos of Ein Seif should be touched, should be affected by the esesfiras, that it should be impressed upon the pshitos of the Ein Seif, the idea of esesfiras agnuzas. But besides for that, in the Ein Seif there is nothing of tziyur at all. Huayde lost man, the asfiras, is entirely from the esesfiras of Atzilus that are touching the pshitas of Ein Seif. Velation is havo meha Ein Seif. It's not as though in the Ein Seif, in the pshitas of Ein Seif, there's two separate things like fish and water, tziyur and pshitas. So when the Adam ha'elyon looks into the Ein Seif, the Ein Seif remains pasha b'tachas apshitas, even though the Adam ha'elyon is being reflected back after touching the Ein Seif from the Ein Seif into Atzilus. So on the one hand, something is happening in the Ein Seif that it takes on the tziyur of spheres, which is reflecting back. And on the other hand, nothing is happening in the pshitas of the Ein Seif. So the pshitas of the Ein Seif itself is being reflected back. Lachein, therefore, einam, the way the esesfiras hagnuzis are reflected back from the kamayim apanim lapanim, einam dover nivdol meha Ein Seif. There's no two things here, the esesfiras and the pshitas of Ein Seif, elahu Ein Seif atzma. The esesfiras which touch the pshitas of Ein Seif, on the one hand, impress themselves on the pshitas of the Ein Seif. On the other hand, they're nothing other than the pshitas of the Ein Seif itself. V'alpi and accordingly, when you talk about the concept of the 10 hidden spheres, and that we say that the esesfiras agenuzis are part of pshitas of Ein Seif, and their entire tziyur is because esesfiras of Atzilus look into them, you have two opposite things. On the one hand, the bechitzenius and yonim hu yechelis l'sfiras. On the chitzenius level, that means in the esesfiras agenuzis there is a yechelis for spheres. That means there is the idea that oir has a connection to spheres. Or bepnimius and Ein Seif. And on a deeper level, it's Ein Seif. So this chitzenius and this pnimius, which I guess in a very, very separated way is two steps. In a very edel way, it's two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, the esesfiras hagenuzas, which are reflecting back on the esesfiras hagluyas, have to do with the tziyur of the esesfiras. On the other hand, the esesfiras hagenuzas, which are reflected back on the esesfiras hagluyas, are nothing other than the pshitas of Ein Seif. In other words, it is an oid which is entirely pashut and entirely mitzuyir at the same time. And what this means is not that the oid is a little bit changed by the tzir or the efsheri tzir, so we should be able to go into kelim and so on as we understand it in convention. When we talk about the slapshus of Eid and Keli, here we're talking about Eid Ein Seif, which on the one hand is entirely Ein Seif, without any tzir whatsoever, and at the same time it has tzir. To say it alternatively, on the one hand the Eid Ein Seif has taken on a tzir of kamayim aponim laponim. On the other hand, what's being reflected back from the pshitas of Ein Seif to Atzilus is entirely Pasha. And if I understand it correctly, this is the ultimate Ein Mitzuyir. It's the deepest content of Ein Mitzuyir, because Ein Mitzuyir allows for two opposites. That Pshitas is reaching the world, and Pshitas is reaching the world. In other words, Pshitas is reaching the world, that what's coming down is the Pshitas of Ein Seif. And Pshitas is reaching the world means that it's actually coming into the world because there's a tzir in the air that prepares it to come into Kli. But in this two opposites, that although the Esesfiras Agnuzis have Esesfiras, they're absolutely Pashat, and somehow this air, which is simultaneously entirely Pashat, and has a tzir, when it's mislabish in the Kelim of Atzilus, Kamayim Aponim Laponim Kilev Adam, in the Pnimius of Atzilus, on the one hand it's tzir, that's why it's coming into Atzilus. On the other hand, it's pshitus, which is what makes it Ein Seif. And we continue in the next paragraph on the bottom of page at H Pei Tes. V'hinei Mevu'alil, we also discussed earlier in the Maamar Sif Dalet, the kamayim haponim leponim shnei inyon. When you speak about the idea of looking into a face and into water, having the water reflect back on you, there's two steps. Step number one, Shehekdemus hamistakel haponim hamistakelas b'mayim nidas b'mayim. First of all, when you look into the water takes on the image that's looking into it. And second of all, v'shehekdemus zu nidis achakach laha'adam hamistakel, then it reflects back to the person looking into it. And there's an emphasis on being 2 points. Point number one, the water takes on the image that's being shown to it. And point number two, separately, the water gives that image back. Hainu, this means, Shadmus hanidis laha'adam, the countenance which the person sees when he looks into the water and sees his reflection, he admus hanidis ba'mayim, is not seeing his reflection, he's seeing the water. And as the water is carrying his image. The same is true when you're talking about Sfiris. When the 10 Sfiris of Atzilus, which is considered the Tachten, looks into the Pshitas of Ein Seif, which is Atika Gedisha and higher, and reflects back, Nasim Ponim, it develops a countenance, a Tziyur, as Sfiris Hagenuzis, Bahamayim, in the water, which is Pshitas the Ein Seif. When Atzilus looks into the Pshitas of Ein Seif, the Ein Seif takes on the Tziyur of Sfiris, which looked into it. On the other hand, and as a second step, Nimshachim u'mizgalim, it's drawn down and revealed upon him all yenim, this higher face. And of course, in this case, the higher face doesn't mean what Elyon normally means. Elyon normally means Atzilus. Here, Atzilus is the Tacht and Elyon is the Ein Seif. Sheba Hamayim, which is in the water, Eses Sfiris Hagenuzis. Milmayla lamata, from heaven to earth, from a higher level to a lower level, from Ein Seif to Atzilus. Umizeh, and this is the basis of Nase Ponim Atachtenim, that Atzilus has a face as a Sfiras da Atzilus. So as a Sfiras da Atzilus look at the Pshitas of Ein Seif and impress themselves on the Pshitas of Ein Seif. The Pshitas of Ein Seif then gives back those as a Sfiras to as a Sfiras of Atzilus. And when as a Sfiras of Atzilus receive the as a Sfiras Hagenuzis, which are reflected back into Sfiras of Atzilus, that's the pnimius of the Sfiras of Atzilus. Hainu, that means, once you have this exchange, that Adam at Elyon looks into the Pshitas of Ein Seif, and the Pshitas of Ein Seif looks back at Adam HaElyon, Shein Yonim, das Sfiras Hageluyes bepnimius. When you look at the 10 revealed Sfiras, the Sfiras of Atzilus, as they are of Pnimius level. And the way I'm explaining the word Pnimius to you, it's sort of a second step. The first step is Chitzonius. Hashem creates Ein Seif, it goes into Atzilus through a Tzimtzum and a Miyat and a Slapshas. But then these Esesfiras of Atzilus reflect against the Pshitas of Ein Seif and bring a second Gilui, a Pnimius Gilui, which is both tzir and pshitas at the same time. Says the Rebbe, Hu hagilui de esesfiras hagnuzis. The inner dimension, the sensitivity of Atzilus, of the revelation of 10 hidden spheres, bidugmas dmus haponim, like the countenance of a face, hanidis la'adam hamistakel ba'amayim, that he sees back, it's reflected back to him, the face that he shows to the water, then shown back to him. Shehu hadamus hanidis ba'amayim esesfiras hagnuzis. It's the face that's in the water. Now, but when we add what we explained, that's the last line on page Reish Pei Tes. Shadamus hanidis b'hamayim. Now we're turning to page Reish Tzadek. The countenance that appears in the water, he hamayim atzmam, is nothing other than water itself, because there are no two things in the water. The water and what it's reflecting. It's the water itself which is being reflected. Move on, it's understood. Shegam haponim atachteinim esesfiras d'Atzilus. When you talk about the 10 spheres of Atzilus, in their pnimius aspect, in their second step after the spheres of Atzilus exist in the way of chitzenius, and they reflect of as the spheres of Ein Seif, and reflect back down to the pnimius of Atzilus, shehema gilui de ponim oyenim, which is the revelation of the pnimius of Atzilus. Says the Rebbe, inyanam hapnimi hu. The esesfiras hagenuzas, which reflect off or onto the esesfiras hageluyas as the pnimius of the esesfiras of Atzilus, you know what they really are? Mayim and pshitas they didn't say. So although on the one hand, the kamayim upon him means that the Ein Seif is reflecting esesfiras based on the fact that esesfiras looked into it. On the other hand, in the Ein Seif, there is no esesfiras, there's only Ein Seif. So the esesfiras that are reflected back from the pshitas of the Ein Seif are bechitzenius esesfiras and bepnimius pshitas of Ein Seif. And this is the ultimate meaning, like I'm telling you, of pshitas and siyur. Because here you have an eid which is absolutely pashut, and yet because in the eid there's a kamayim aponim leponim, it's revealed in Atzilus as though it has siyur. Bechitzenius it's siyur and bepnimius it's Ein Seif. There is no two things here. Water and a color in the water. There's only water, and how the water itself is the color that's been impressed upon it. And that's what comes into Atzilus. So the chitzonius of Atzilus, if you will, the Atzilus as it exists before the kamayim aponim leponim, has a tzir of esesiris. And the pnimius of Atzilus, which is how Atzilus is enhanced by a gili of esesfiras hagnuzis into esesfiras of Atzilus, is that now in Atzilus you have an oid which is on the one hand tzir, which is what makes it gili and Atzilus and going into kelim. On the other hand pshitas, because there's nothing about this oid other than the oid itself. The ponim hamistakel behem has not changed the oid at all. Now, I'm not allowed to say what I'm about to say. I'm really not allowed to say what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I'm not saying it because I think it's true. I'm saying it because maybe it's words that will help you appreciate what's going on here. What we're describing here is Sevav Kalaman becoming Mamala Kalaman, but not Sevav Kalaman becoming Mamala Kalaman being reduced. Sevav Kalaman becoming Mamala Kalaman being simultaneously Poshet, Sevav, and at the same time Mamala. How could Sevav Kalaman be both Sevav Kalaman and Mamala Kalaman at the same time? And the answer is because the Mamala Kalaman in the Sevav Kalaman is not from the Sevav Kalaman, it's from the Kamayim Aponim Leponim. It's what's looking into the Sevav Kalaman, on the one hand. And on the other hand, the Sevav Kalaman, when it gives back the Kamayim Aponim, which look into it, is giving Sevav itself. So you have, in effect, like two concepts of this whole issue of Eidos Mitziyadim and Eidos Pshutim. Usually, Eidos Mitziyadim means that there's a change in the Eid. Here, there's an idea of Eidos Mitziyadim where there's no change in the Eid whatsoever. It's Tziyad and Pshitos in the absolute sense at the same time. Okay? And this is the taich of the three words, Kamayim, Aponim, Leponim. The face is Atzilus. Kamayim, Aponim is the face of Ein Seif, which is affected by the face of Atzilus. And then Leponim, it's reflected back down into the Esesfiras of Atzilus. And now, the Rebbe explains this inside. And now, once we understand how we understand the meeting between Atzilus and Ein Sof and Ein Sof and Atzilus, Yuvan Mashakosav Kamayim Aponim Leponim Kein Lev Adam Liad. That just like we understand the first half of the pasuk, Kamayim Aponim Leponim, that Atzilus looks into the Pshitas of Ein Sof, and the Pshitas of Ein Sof gives it back to the Esesphiras of Atzilus, that at Bechitzenius Esesphiras, and Bepshitus, Bepnimius, it's Pshitos. This helps us understand the second half of the pasuk, Kein Lev Adam Liad. Now, of course, we had a question. The question that we had was that Kamayim Aponim Leponim makes sense. Why? Because Mayim, or Ein Sof, is Pasha B'Tachas Lapshitas. And when something exists without any predefinition, it will reflect whatever looks into it. The reason when you look at water, you see yourself, is because water has no definition. So your face touches the Pshitas of Ein Sof, the face of Atzilus touches the Pshitas of Ein Sof, and is reflected back because the Pshitas of Ein Sof has no prior definition, so it's able to reflect back what the Pshitas, what the Esesphiras of Atzilus are. But Kein Lev Adam Aladim is going on Adam Matachtan and Adam Elyon, Asiya and Atzilus. And the question is, how can Atzilus receive and reflect what Asiya is, since Atzilus has a tzir, the tzir of Atzilus and the tzir of Asiya contradict? And the answer is, Kamayim Aponim Leponim, Kein Lev Adam Aladim. Because there is a pnimius to Atzilus, based on Kamayim Aponim Leponim. So because there's a pnimius to Atzilus, based on Kamayim Aponim Leponim, Atzilus has an oir, which is on the one hand tzir, on the other hand totally pshitos. Therefore, Kein Lev Adam Aladim, the reason Adam Matachton can touch Adam Elyon and be reflected back down is because the pnimius of Atzilus is also pashut. Let's read it inside. The Kmei Shebemayim, on the third line on page Reish Tzadik. Pshit does the Ein Sof just like in water, which is the Pshitas of Ein Sof. Idea lost man when Atzilus looks in the Pshitas of Ein Sof. Nasa behem ponim. Spheres, it affects that in the Ein Sof there should be spheres. But at the same time, even though now in the Pshitas of Ein Sof there's spheres, it isn't that you now have two things, the Pshitas of Ein Sof and spheres, but that the Pshitas of Ein Sof is itself the spheres, or the spheres itself the Pshitas of Ein Sof. The same is true on a lower level in Atzilus. When a person down here in Asiya, who's called Adam Matach, the lower person, reflects upwards towards Atzilus, Nase Hatziyur v'Hadmus, the Adam Matachten be Adam Elyon. The countenance, the image, the form of the person down here is impressed on Atzilus, and then Atzilus reflects it back down here. And again, it's the same dichotomy. What Atzilus is giving us back is, on the one hand, the tzir of the Adam Matachten. On the other hand, there's nothing other than the Pshitas of Ein Sof. There's an Atzilus. So what Atzilus is being made back down to us in this second Pnimius Dika dimension is Pshitas of Ein Sof and tzir at the same time. And he explains, the question was, the reason why, in the first half of the pasuk, in the statement, Kamayim Aponim Leponim, the idea made sense. Shebemayim is the mus Aponim hamistakelas, but the reason when you look into water, you see yourself. The water has no predefinition. Therefore, it can tolerate every definition and therefore reflects back you. But that only works if the image, the thing you're looking at, is plain. What if the thing you're looking at has a predefinition? Hatzir shaladover, the former definition of what you're looking at is seised litzuras haponim hamistakelas boy, contradicts the person looking into that image from having himself reflected back. Kanal sefe. And the question therefore was, the kiven she'adam ha'elyon as a spheres Atzilus, since Adam ha'elyon, which is the 10 spheres of Atzilus, who bebchinas tzir, is not poshet, it's tzir. So the person's tzir, which touches the Adam ha'elyon or Atzilus tzir, contradict each other. Eich shayach, how does it happen? Sheyiyah by hatzir, the Adam hatacht. That the Adam hatacht, the person below, should touch Atzilus, and then Atzilus should give back to the Adam hatachten the mirror image of Adam hatachten if Atzilus is not poshet. Says the Rebbe Vabir Bazed, the answer is as follows. The way the Eibishter created Atzilus, that can't be. Because with Eibush, the created Atzilus on a chitzenius level, Atzilus has a tzir, and Asiya has a tzir, they contradict. But when you add the kamayim upon him leponim, which is the pnimius level of Atzilus, that Atzilus touches Ein Seif, and Ein Seif is reflected back on Atzilus, so that in Atzilus there's an Eid, which is on the one hand tzir, and on the other hand the pshitos, that allows for Adam HaTachten to be reflected off Adam HaElyon as well, and be reflected back in Adam HaTachten in the same way. Kein Leiv Adam HaLadam. And let's read it inside. Not as far as creation is concerned. As far as creation is concerned, there's a chitzonius dika model of Esesfidas of Atzilus and Esesfidas Lamata. Esesfidas of Atzilus are tzir, Esesfidas Lamata are tzir, and they're mutually exclusive. But then there's the pnimius. The pnimius has to do with avodah. When a yid down here serves Hashem, the first thing that happens is kamayim aponim lepon. The first thing that happens is not that he touches Atzilus. The first thing that happens is he causes Atzilus to touch Ein Seif. And by causing Atzilus to touch Ein Seif, Atzilus gets an oir, which is poshet and tzir at the same time. And then it reflects back down to Asiyah, the Adam HaTachen that looks into itself. Let's read it inside. A yid down here does work. Mizgal is sapnim, is the Adam HaElyon, reveals the inner dimension of Adam HaElyon. What is the inner dimension of Adam HaElyon? Es Sfiras Atzilus, the 10 Sfiras of Atzilus, but not the 10 Sfiras of Atzilus which are limited in their tziyur, but rather Shrein Yonamhu. What is the pnimius of Sfiras of Atzilus? Hagilud Sfiras of Gnuzes, the way 10 Sfiras of Gnuzes, which are on the one hand Sfiras. On the other hand, they're Maamar, the pshitas of Ein Seif. What did the Rebbe call before? Mayim, pshitas, Ein Seif. Ponim anirim ba'amayim va'acheheim hamayim, until that the pnimius of the Sfiras of Atzilus are the water, or the pshitas, the Ein Seif, the plainness of the Ein Seif, Atzma. So because of Avodah, in Atzilus you have a Gilu, which is an Ein Mitzuyir, which is at the same time Pasha B'tachlis. And therefore, Vayadei Shem Mizgala. And through this effort of a person, which causes a revelation, parenthesis, Idei Havei, Adam HaTachen is the person that we do down here. Hapnimi is the Adam HaElyon, that in Atzilus there should be a Pnimius Dika dimension. Not only the Chitzenius Dika dimension. And the Pnimius Dika dimension of Adam HaElyon, who are Pshitas the Ein Seif, in the Pshitas of Ein Seif. So now Atzilus has an oir which is both Poshet and Mitzuyir, or Mitzuyir and Poshet at the same time. It's Mamish Mitzuyir and it's Mamish Poshet. Like I said to you before, as if Seif of Kalam would be Mamala Kalam. And therefore, I am 5 lines from the end of the paragraph on page Reish Tzadik, F Shali is Behatzir Adam HaTachten. That's how Atzilus is able to receive and reflect the tziyur of Adam HaElyon, because the pnimius of Atzilus is Poshet. Valpize, and therefore, when you think about the pasuk, it's not only a correlation, but it's a setup. Yeshleim. The kamayim aponim leponim. When the pasuk says that when Atzilus reflects Atzilus, is not only a prelude to Asiya, Atzilus reflecting Asiya, but hu gam tam ubir. It's the reason, it's the clarification, it's the precondition. Al kein leiv adam alav. For Atzilus to reflect Asiya, Ein Seif has to first reflect Atzilus in what this Maamar calls Pnimius. The inyan mayim haponim leponim hu. The idea that when your face looks into the water is going to give back that face. Hu sha'aponim hatachteinim hanirim b'chutz lamayim. The face below, which is seen outside of the water. In other words, the way the pshitas of Ein Seif, which is tzir, or the tzir, which is the pshitas of Ein Seif, becomes eses filas agluyas. Hem chadim aponim ha'alyenim. They become one with the ponim ha'alyenim hanirim ba'mayim, which is seen in the water as eses filas hagenuzes. Ve'at, to such an extent, shem chadim ba'mayim atzma, that the eses filas, which touch the Ein Seif, which is then reflected back down onto Atzilus, is hamayim atzmam, the waters themselves. In other words, pshitas the Ein Seif, the plainness of the Ein Seif. V'zehu hatam, and this makes it possible. This is the explanation for Alev ha'adam l'adam. the idea that Adam HaTachton should touch Adam HaElyon and that Adam HaElyon should reflect back to Adam HaTachton is because Sheba Adam HaElyon Nasa Hatzir, in Adam HaElyon, in as much as Adam HaElyon has a pnimius and a pshitos, it takes on the tzir of Adam HaTachton and then it's able to reflect it back down. So if you do the math, there are 3 steps. The first step is the person down here doing avodah. That's the first step. The second step is that because the person down here does avodah, there's a kamayim upon him leponim. Atzilus touches, ain't safe, and is reflected back. And the third step is kein leiva adam ala adam, that the adam atachn is reflected off the pnimius of the spheres of Atzilus, and that comes down to the person. Down here also this idea of 2 opposites, tritus and siyur. But the Rebbe added a 4th idea. And this 4th idea, I guess you could say it comes before the first of these 3 ideas, or after all 3 of these ideas. But either way, it's another idea. Ubahagdom. Let's remember. We were discussing before Esesfiras Agnuzis. And when we were discussing Esesfiras Agnuzis, we said that there's 3 levels higher than Esesfiras Agnuzis. There is Atzmos, and Atzmos decided that Esrusa Latata, Esrusa D'Liela, that what we do should touch Hashem and reflect back. There's Ein Seif, where nothing that we do touches it. And there is the fact that Hashem wanted that we should be able to touch Ein Seif, so that when we touch Ein Seif, we'll impress upon the Ein Seif as Esfiras. All 3 of these levels are before Esfiras Agnuzis. The first is Atzmos. The second is Ein Seif, that has nothing to do with Sfiras. And the third is Ein Seif, which is prepared to be able to receive Sfiras, even though it has not yet received them. So there's 2 places, there's 2 ideas that are hard as Sfiras Agnuzis that have to do with the person's avodah. The first is the oil which is prepared to be touched by the Sfiras. And the second is Atzmos, that decided that we should be able to touch Esesfiras. So the Rebbe now adds this 4th idea to this 4th step to this scheme, in addition to the person's avodah and the way it affects Atzilus touching and being touched by Ein Seif. And how that, the 3rd idea would be, how Atzilus is touched by Asiya and reflected back to Asiya. There's also the idea that Atzmos willed all of this. And therefore the Rebbe adds if one more idea. We discussed earlier in the Maamar, and we talked about this in our second class, our second introduction to this Maamar. The whole idea that Hashem wants, willed. That what happens on high should be based on what we do. And this is the beginning of this idea, that what we do should matter to the Eibishter is an Atzmos Mamish. If you remember how we explained that the idea of Yisrael of Machshava with the Torah of the Magid, before there was anything to do with the world, the Yid existed in Atzmos. So on the highest of levels, the Yid who does not exist yet, because the world doesn't exist yet, there hasn't even been a thought of the world, already exists in the Atzmos in as much as it's a part of Atzmos. So the Rebbe says Yashleima, that when you say that a person down here triggers several steps, the person does avoid it, that's 1. Number 2, he triggers a meeting between Atzilus and Ein Seif, that's reciprocal. And number 3, he then triggers a meeting between Asiya and Atzilus, which is again reciprocal. There's another idea. The Neis, in addition to the idea Shayadeh, Yaveh, the work that we do down here. Mizgal, Pnimius, Dadam Elyon reveals the Pnimius of Atzilus. Shuchad, Mapshitas de Ein Seif, which is one with the Pshitas of Ein Seif, which is much higher than Atzilus. Kamesha b'chinas mayim, like it's compared to water itself. And what? We know about water itself? 2 things. On the one hand, it's ha'or sheyesh le'shayches le'tziyur, light which has the possibility of taking on a tziyur before it takes on the tziyur. Dug mas mayim kipshutim, like plain water, shagam lefnei mistaklim, and before one looks into them. So the way the Rebbe said it in the Maamar, they're in the same reality. The face and the water are both Gashmim. Heim be'ef, and the water exists in such a fashion. That the water will reflect the face that looks into them if and when someone looks at them. The same is true in Ein Seif. Ein Seif is prepared that when Sfiris, that when Atzilus will look at Ein Seif, it will reflect it back. That's the first idea. That's the Kamayim Aponim Laponim idea, which is then followed by the Kain Lev Adam Al Adam idea. Adds the Rebbe, Hine, in addition, idea, the person, which the work that the person does down here. In addition to affecting, touching Atzilus, to touch Ein Seif, and reflect itself back on Atzilus. And then touching Asiya, to affect the now Pnimius of Atzilus, which will then reflect the Pnimius and Pshitas of Ein Seif back down into Asiya. There's another idea, and that is Nimshach Galgili Atzmus Ein Seif. The person's work reveals the Yisrael Olav Machshava, how he does one with Atzmus, Shalamayla Gami Ha'er Kmeishu Mitzad Atzmi, which is higher than that level of Oyer, which we cannot touch at all. Or to say this in other words, what the Rebbe is saying here in this last paragraph, when a Yid does Avodah, there are two qualitative effects. The first qualitative effect is what we call Gilui. When a Yid does Avodah, he pushes a button, which pulls a lever and pulls on a string, and a series of events happen. We call them a Hishtalshalus, a cause and effect. A Yid does Avodah, and Ein Sof, Atzilus touches Ein Seif, Ein Seif is affected at Atzilus, and then Asiya touches the Pshitas of Atzilus, which reflects Asiya. So the series of steps in Oyer being affected, being touched, and being brought down through the Avodah. But then there's another idea, how a Yid is one with the Eibishter. When Yid does Avodah, reveals how a Yid is one with Hashem. And when a Yid does Avodah, and he reveals how a Yid is one with Hashem, he's not revealing a higher light coming down to a lower level, or how the Pnimius of this Yid is a higher level of Ein Seif. He's revealing how he's one with Hashem, which is categorically separate and infinitely higher than the first idea, what we would call in our culture Atzmus. When a Yid touches Seder Ishtalshalus and causes Oyer to be revealed, that's Giluyim. But when a Yid touches Atzmus Amhus and reveals that the truth of everything is a Yid, because a Yid is one with Atzmus Amhus, he reveals Atzmus Amhus as he's one with a Yid. And this is the end of the Parsha of Kamayim Aponim Laponim Kein Levadim Alon. And of course the end of the Parsha is the way the Parsha began. That even though Ishtalshalus goes from a higher level to a lower level, it begins and it ends with Adam Atachtan, a Yid down here serving HaKadosh Baruch. And in Mitzvah Hashem, in the next Shir, hopefully, we will learn the beginning and the end of the Maamar.